học kỳ trực tuyến, cung cấp nội dung học tập miễn phí cho học sinh toàn quốc ngay trên nền tảng ứng dụng học tập Kiến Guru.
Đêm gala của tôi tuổi teen và chương trình được tài trợ độc quyền bởi ứng dụng học tập Kiến Guru.
Xin cảm ơn các bạn đã quan tâm và theo dõi. Hãy cùng like và subscribe để đón xem nhiều video hơn nữa nhé.
Rồi Phúc Trường cho tay trước Phúc Hoàng ơi, 1 cộng 3 bằng mấy?
3 bằng 4.
Chính xác rồi, bây giờ Phúc Trường muốn mở ô số mấy?
4.
Câu này so với nhau như thế nào được không? Rồi, thì hai con Pokemon này sau khi thể hiện ra thì mình sẽ hiện những cái chỉ số của mỗi con Pokemon đúng không? Bạn dự đoán xem Pokemon nào sẽ chiến thắng? Nhã, con nghĩ là Pokemon nào sẽ chiến thắng?
Dạ thưa thầy là Pikachu. Phép trọng Addison.
Đúng rồi. Tất cả mọi bài rồi cô để là trên link trên cái phần về nhiệm vụ cho con rồi. Rồi con cảm ơn Nghi Khanh, con cảm ơn Minh An.
Ôi mẹ con nói mẹ con thích con luôn.
Hello and welcome back for our 4th and final installment of our science series in combination with Everest Education and Kính Guru. My name once again is Eli and I'm thrilled to be with you as we study science and learn a little bit about the world around us. Today we're going to be studying one of my favorite topics, something called fire. So fire is a chemical reaction that gives off light and heat. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's an example of a chemical process, not a physical process. Once the chemical reaction has started, eventually we can see part of the fire. This visible part is called the flame. What's a flame made of? Well, carbon dioxide is in there, water, surprisingly, oxygen and nitrogen will all be part of the flame that we can see. If enough energy is added, then eventually the gases in the flame can ionize and we see, or at least some instruments can see, something called plasma. Depending on the substances that you've lit and the impurities in the substance, the color of the flame and the fire's intensity will be different. Let's see this in action. But first, a very important warning. So fire is very useful, but it can be quite dangerous. All right, some of the following experiments can lead to serious injury or death if you're not careful. All right, fire is a force of nature, and nature must be respected. Make sure to have adult supervision if you decide to try any of this at home. All right, always be prepared with things like a fire extinguisher. A heavy wool blanket can help smother flames. Having water available will help with some types of fires. And of course, you want face protection and gloves. All right, make sure nothing that is flammable is nearby, because remember, fire can fly. Have you ever wondered why fireworks come in many different colors? Well, they were originally invented right in this part of the world. And we're about to see how some of those colors are created. To do this experiment, we're using a handful of different chemicals. We'll be using some ethanol as a fuel. And to get our fire started, I have a lighter here. Now, as a reminder, we need to be extremely careful with an experiment like this. All right? We've taken several precautions. We have people standing by ready to put out any fire that spreads. We're using a metal pan to protect the surface. I'm wearing gloves to protect myself from the chemicals. And we're using metal trays on top of this, little candle holders, to keep the chemicals separated. So, With that said, I've added from 5 to 10 grams of each chemical in here. Starting on the left, we have potassium, let me make sure I get the name right, permanganate. Potassium permanganate is the black one here. Then we have potassium chloride, which are these big crystals here. The bluish green is copper chloride. I wonder what color that will be. We have calcium chloride is the small balls here. And 2 powders here. We have sodium borate, also known as borax, what we used in our very first week, and sucrose, common table sugar. So, we're going to open this, and I'm back. All right, so we're just going to put a little bit of ethanol in each of these. Okay. There we go, we're getting that beautiful chain reaction. See, getting nice and bright. It's more of a white light. There's a little bit of blue and green, but it's a very, very bright reaction. Yeah, now we can see that beautiful, rich blue and orangish yellow at the top. It's one of my favorites with this beautiful, deep, greenish blue. Aquamarine, maybe? This is absolutely a color you've seen in fireworks before. Now note that many of our chemicals here are using chloride, so you can guess that it's the other part that's giving us the color. So in this case, copper chloride, the copper is what's giving us this beautiful green-blue color. All right, and we can see this is more of an orange flame. A nice solid orange color. A little bit of blue down at the base. That might be coming from the aluminum shell that it's in. And I see it turning a little bit more yellow as well. So there we go. We saw, hopefully you can see some of the different colors of our chemicals as they burned. And that is how fireworks work. How can fire be helpful? Well, there's a few ways. For example, forest fires can help stimulate growth and keep competing forces balanced in a forest after a forest fire. It can also be very destructive and harmful, like when it burns down houses or pollutes the atmosphere with dangerous chemicals. We humans have been using fire for a very long time. It helps us grow food, cook food. It helps us make things like a metal knife. It keeps planes flying. And it overcomes darkness and light and freezing temperatures on a cold winter's night. There are many ways to create the chemical reactions that lead to combustion. Traditionally, human societies use things like rubbing together sticks as a basic yet effective way to make fire. Today we've got a few easier methods available to us, like lighters you can buy at any store near you. But what if you don't have a lighter? If you have some steel wool and a 9-volt battery, you can still start a fire. Let's watch. So my favorite way to start a fire is using a very simple and effective lighter. However, we don't always have a lighter available. What about if you have a 9-volt battery and some steel wool? Let's see how that works. So steel wool, I have very fine still wool here. The more fine it is, the better. I'm going to tear off a section here, if I can. Let's see how difficult this is. Okay, I have a section of still wool here. Put it down here. All right, so we're going to take our 9-volt battery and try and create some points of contact here. Another one. Some people call this the marching ants experiment because the little pieces of fire crawling across the still wool kind of look like ants marching around. So all of these tools, whether a lighter or still wool and a battery, rely on 3 ingredients: oxygen, heat, and fuel. 1, 2, and 3. If there's enough of each of them, then the fire will continue to burn with what we call a chain reaction. Let's do a controlled experiment to examine these 3 items. Okay, it's time for a quick eyebrow check. 1, 2, we're still good. We can keep going. So now let's look at how the 3 ingredients for a fire are essential to creating a fire. I have 3 candles, and we're going to try different things with each candle to see what causes the fire to die. So first, we light the candles. All right. 2 candles lit. And here comes our 3rd candle. Okay, so to start with, I have here a simple glass jar. Nothing fancy. I'm going to put my glass jar over our first candle, and let's see what happens. Slowly but surely, we notice the fire is getting a little bit smaller. All right, so fire number 1 is out. All right, let's look at fire number 3 over here. I have some water. I'm just gonna gently try to pour some water on here. Ooh, it's fighting. All right, there we go. So fire number 3 is out, and fire number 2, well, we're just gonna have to wait on that one a moment. Let's keep talking while fire number 2 is burning. So, for fire number 1, what happened? When I put the glass bottle on top of the candle, I created a sill around here, and the fire used the oxygen in the jar to keep burning. However, eventually it ran out of oxygen. And once there was no more oxygen in the jar, the fire died. So in other words, it ran out of air, one of the key ingredients for fires. On this side, you could argue that by pouring the water on, we stopped it from getting air, but there's another element at play here, and that is heat. The water was able to absorb the heat so that the chain reaction could not continue and the fire died. So if we take away the heat, we lose the fire. And in our last candle, if you can see, I've already taken out most of the wax. All right, so unlike these 2 candles, this one has very little wax. And eventually, the wax, being the fuel, will be burned up and the fire will die. However, I think I may have miscalculated on how long that would take. So I believe for this next part, we need a time lapse. So, one more time. What are the 3 ways a fire can be stopped? Well, let's check. So first, the fuel can be removed. So if it burns through all of its fuel and extra fuel is removed, the fire will stop burning. All right, the oxygen can be removed. This is called smothering a fire. It's how this works and how a fire blanket works. Fires cannot burn in a vacuum or if they're covered in carbon dioxide. Note that certain types of fires, like the magnesium ones used underwater flares, cannot be smothered and will burn in CO2 and water. All right, the final way that you can stop a fire is by removing the heat. The most common way to remove heat is to use water to absorb that heat, putting the fire completely out. Sand is another option that may work better for extra hot fires. For example, burning magnesium. For this next experiment, we're going to use a bottle of soapy water. You can use dish detergent, that works quite well. I've got a long butane lighter and a smaller butane lighter, and you'll see in a moment how I use both of these. You can also do this experiment with methane, which is a more common thing that you would find in a high school science lab, for example. But so I'm going to take my butane lighter, stick it in here, and open it up. So we're now making butane bubbles that are coming up here. All right, and as the bubbles grow, eventually I'm going to dip my hand in here. Then I'm going to light it on fire. So what do you think will happen? All right, we got some nice bubbles there. Let's throw it on my hand. There we go, that was a good one. All right, we can try again. Build up some more bubbles. And see if you can tell me why my hand is protected. It does get a little bit warmer. I can feel that it gets warmer, but it is not hot. It does not burn me. All right. Here come some more bubbles. I'll let it go all the way to the top here. And we'll scoop it out. And using my small lighter that's not wet. Another beautiful fire. So, my hand feels a little bit warmer, but it's not burned. Why is that? Well, we'll talk about it in just a moment. So why didn't I get burned? Well, by making sure my hand was very wet before holding the methane, I made sure that there was a layer of water between my skin and the flame. Water has a very high specific heat, which just means that it can absorb a lot of energy before it raises in temperature. So in this case, it absorbed a lot of energy from the fire before I could feel the extra heat in my hand. Now that doesn't mean my hand didn't get warmer, but it just means it got warmer slowly enough that the fire finished burning, it ran out of fuel before any damage was done to my skin. All right, remember, if the water had evaporated, I could have been very badly burned. So this is an experiment you must be extremely careful with. Let's see one more example of specific heat in action. And for this next experiment, I have a balloon here that's filled with water. We're simply going to apply some heat using this torch, if it lights. And we'll switch torches and see what happens. How long can we hold it here? All right, we'll do a countdown. We'll give it about 10 more seconds, see what happens. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it still hasn't popped. For the sake of time, I think we can say that this held up for quite a while with the fire under it. So now, I'm just gonna put this one down, and we'll try a balloon that has just air inside of it and see how different that is. All right, it's not a very full balloon here, let's tie it up. All right. I want it to be nice and full with air so we can see the difference, if I can tie it. Thankfully, balloon tying is not typically something that's needed for science experiments, but here we go. Okay, so now we have a balloon with just some air inside of it. I'm using my pliers to keep myself away from the flame. See if we can use this long one again. No, it's still too wet. Okay. Well, and that was about, what, 3 seconds? So I think you can see the difference there. And that's what happens with water in the balloon versus air in the balloon. So why does the balloon with water inside last longer than the balloon without? Well, just like in my previous experiment, the water absorbed the heat from the flame and away from the rubber of the balloon. Although you can't see it, actually the water inside of the balloon started to move thanks to a process called convection. Convection happens when a fluid, which is a gas or a liquid, moves due to uneven density. So the hotter water has a lower density and moves up, while the cooler water, which has a higher density, moves down. Let's see convection a bit more clearly with some bottles and food coloring. Okay, I have here 3 different bottles, glass bottles, with about the same amount of water in each of them. The only thing that is different is the temperature of the water. I have my control here on my left, which is room temperature water, the same temperature as the air around us. In the middle, very, very hot, is some water that was just boiled, so it's nearly at boiling temperature. And on my right, on this side, water that is very cold. There was ice inside of it that just finished melting. So I've got some food coloring here. We're going to try and put about the same number of drops in each one, and then we'll see what happens over time. All right. So first our control, let's see if we can do 1 drop. Yeah, 1 drop looks good. 1 drop in the hot. 1 drop in the cold. And let's step back and see what happens over time here. Okay, so a little bit of time has passed. We see that the hot water has mixed entirely, as far as I can tell. It's completely mixed. The control is a little bit more mixed. It is still mixing in parts of it, especially towards the top. And the cold water is the least fully mixed. There's still a lot of clear parts in this water. You can see up close, I can see that the ink is spreading out faster on this one than in this one. And of course, it was the most speedy with the hot water. So what happened with the drops of food coloring? Well, liquid is constantly vibrating. Similarly, different parts of the water had slightly different temperatures. Maybe the outside was a little bit warmer than the inside because of these lights. All right, so those differences in temperature, which lead to differences in density, result in convection. The vibration of the water molecules combined with the convection caused all three bottles to constantly be mixing. However, when energy is added to the water in the form of heat energy, the vibration and the rate of convection increases. So the warmer bottles mixed more quickly. This is why water that is boiling actually will freeze faster than room temperature water. And if you don't believe me, you can try that one at home. For our final demonstration, let's do something that's safe and will allow you to send secret messages with just a lemon and a little bit of heat. And for our final experiment, we'll do something a little bit more fun and maybe useful. Have you ever wanted to share a message, but you had to make sure that it was secret from the person who wrote it to the person who got it? Well, using the simple ingredient of a lime, a Q-tip, and a source of heat, we can write our own secret messages. So to start with, I'm going to open our lime and squeeze out some juice here. All right, it won't take much juice. The lime will be our ink. So this is going to be our secret invisible ink. All right, so I think that looks like a nice amount. I'm going to pick up my pen or the Q-tip. Nice and wet. I'm going to write my secret message. Again, and that one again. Okay, now we'll wait a few minutes for this to finish drying, and we'll come back and see what happens when we add some heat.
A few moments later.
Okay, so we're back. Our message has had time to dry. Maybe you gave it to a courier who took it to your friend, and now your friend wants to read the message. Well, they can use a hairdryer, that's a common thing, or a lighter like this. We're going to hold it nice and far away. Does not need to be too close. And we'll start applying a little bit of heat. All right, we can see one letter coming in. Another letter there. This one might take a little bit longer, it was thicker. All right, and there we can see our message. Of course, if you write a secret message, it must be true. Whoever wrote this clearly likes me. And there you go. With just a lime, now you can send secret messages to your friends. So, why did this one work? Well, what do you think the lemon juice does to the paper it touches? Think about it. Well, consider that lemon or lime juice is acidic. This acid weakens the paper where it touches it. These weaker parts of the paper burn more quickly than the untouched parts. Also, lemon juice has some sugar in it. The sugar burns into the dark brown and black spaces that we saw on the paper. This is a process called caramelization, which is related to the candy that we like, and it created that darker part of the burned paper. So thank you once again for being with me over the last 4 or 3 or 2 or even joining me for the first time today here at Kiến Guru with help from Everest. We've been having a great time making these demonstrations, and I hope that you feel a little bit more inspired or grateful or excited about science. I know that I am grateful that I still have my eyebrows after today, and that is why I want to remind you to please be very, very careful if you do try any of these experiments with heat and electricity and fire at home. I want you to have a great time learning about science, but I don't want you to get hurt. So, with much gratitude in my heart, my name is Eli. I'm a teacher at Everest Education. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you again in the future.